Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Board Masters with me, Chris Mullins. And today I wanted to talk about cost and how you justify it in terms of the expense of the hobby we're in terms of board games, because it can be a very expensive hobby, as I have come to learn over the last few years. Well, not even few years actually, only 12 months. But I was just wondering how people approach justifying the expense. How do they define value for money? And I'll give a bit of an example, really. As you know from many of my other footage, I come from video games, and probably 12, 13 years ago, when I started earning my own money, started buying my own video games, I would just go out and pre-order what I wanted and would happily pay full price for games. And I learned over those first few years that it's probably not a good idea to do that, because I would end up buying games full price that would then sit on the shelf in the dreaded backlog, and by the time I got round to playing them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, I could have bought them for an absolute fraction of the price. I could have bought them for a tenner instead of £45, for example. And a lot of the time that was quite gutting, really, that you feel like you've thrown away 35 quid just for the honour of owning a game for a number of years, when you could have just ignored it and picked it up down the line for much cheaper. And so I changed my approach basically to video games, in that now I almost never buy anything new. I generally wait a year, if not two, and by that time pretty much every game you can get on average of like £15, and obviously that is a lot cheaper. And generally I went with the approach with a game, as long as I get like £1 an hour was how I judged it. So I wouldn't mind spending full price for a game if it was at least a 50-hour game. I wouldn't want to spend £50 on a game like Call of Duty, for example, where I'm going to play a 5-6 hour campaign and then I have no interest in online multiplayer, so I paid £10 an hour to play a game. And that approach served me really, really well. And then over the course of the past year, I've obviously transitioned quite heavily into board games, and that sort of approach, or certainly that value system, isn't going to translate in terms of £1 an hour for most games. I mean, I've spent between £350 and £400 on Etherfields alone, and no matter how much I love the game, I'm not going to get 350 to 400 hours of gameplay in on it. So I'm having to rethink my sort of value system on value for money and everything. Now, obviously, there are some very different factors between board games and computer games. With computer games, as I said, after a couple of years, they're probably worth 25% of their initial release value, whereas with board games, particularly the good ones, that doesn't really happen. They will retain their price for much longer. You may get them on sale, but generally, I don't know, a copy of Too Many Bones, okay, it's a premium product that I think is just over 100 quid, but you're going to be able to sell it for probably 60 to 70 quid. And, well, probably at least. And so although you're not getting the same value for money on a pound per hour basis, you have got more of an investment. You've got a physical product that you can sell to recoup some of your costs. I was going to say costs and losses and then combine the two. You can recoup some costs through reselling them. You've got a physical product, which is much more enjoyable, for me at least, than a video game where you just generally have a disc or a cartridge. You don't even get a nice manual to look through anymore like you used to, whereas board games, you get your minis, you get your components, you get the physical board, you get all these bits to interact with, which is a large part of the pleasure for me. And Also, with most board games, obviously there are some exceptions for like solo dedicated games, but for most board games, it's a social experience where you're interacting with people around a table. Generally, it's probably also why I don't feel that tempted by Tabletop Simulator or anything at the moment, because if I'm going to play a board game online, I feel like I may as well just play a video game anyway, because I'm not getting that tactile nature, and speaking to someone over the internet doesn't feel the same to me. Uh, but going back to my original point, sorry for the tangent there, you have that social aspect, and for me, being able to sit around a table with good friends and family and people I care about for an hour or two playing a board game is worth far more to me than sitting on my own playing a console game, even though I absolutely love video games and I have for the last 30 years. Some of my absolute fondest memories are playing computer games, but it isn't as rich an experience as that social interaction, being with the people you care about and sharing something that hopefully you all enjoy. So certainly about having to abandon the pound an hour deal with myself, but I'm not quite sure how to approach it going forward. Feels almost arbitrary to just pick a random, I don't know, £5 an hour, £10 an hour. When I go to the cinema, I mean, that's maybe 20 quid a trip, that's a couple of hours, so that's £10 an hour. So should I apply that to board games as well? Does it only apply the first few times you play a board game? Once you've played a game 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, even though you still enjoy it, it's not new. Is that experience less valuable? You know, there's all these sort of factors and things going on. Obviously, other aspects such as budget are going to apply. If you've got a disposable income of, I don't know, £1,000 a month, then spending 250 quid a month on board games is not an issue. Whereas if you've got a budget of £50 a month, spending £250 a month on board games is a serious problem. Thankfully, I'm certainly nowhere near the grand a month disposable income, but I'm higher than the £50, so I've got a decent sort of comfort zone there, and so I don't feel particularly guilty spending £100 a month on board games. I can justify it from a budget standpoint. But I think there is just a nagging thought in the back of my head about value for money. How am I getting value for money on these games? Even the sort of cheaper games like the ones I featured on the channel, Ni no Kuni 2, Takenoko, and other games like Ticket to Ride, etc. These games that are in the sort of £20 to £30 price bracket that I've played 5 to 10 times. Obviously, they would fail on the old pound an hour metric that I had. So how do I assess it going forward? Have they provided value for money? For me, absolutely yes, because they've all easily justified £3, £4, £5 an hour, and that's something I'm more than willing to pay. But then when you go to the other side of it, the games like This War of Mine, we've maybe played 3 or 4 hours at a cost of closer to £130 because we've got the expansions as well. So, and I've loved those hours playing This War of Mine. I think the game is fantastic, but as it stands, we're looking at closer to £30 to £40 an hour. Is that justifiable? And I suppose the easy answer to that is just play that game more. And I definitely want to, and I appreciate that. It's just fitting in the time a lot of the time. And you know, maybe I've gone too hard too fast, in that this collection is getting already impossible to balance, get all the games and giving them their chance to shine. And I've got so many Kickstarters coming, that's only going to get worse and get harder. So just an interesting topic to talk about, really. I just wanted to get feedback from people in the community about how you justify the expense to yourself, how you define value for money in your games, and yeah, let me know. I'd just have a conversation about it. I've spoken about it many times before, that I'd love to getting a dialogue with people in the community a lot more. So comment down below with any opinions or thoughts you have, and let's spitball it and just have a discussion. But I'll leave it there. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you have a good one. Stay safe and look after yourselves. Thank you very much. Bye bye now.